Hello, Amazing Amphros here with part 4 of my Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past Minimalist Run. This segment is going to be mostly about the second major Light World dungeon, the Desert Palace. This dungeon's a lot more fun than the Eastern Palace. The enemies are more interesting, and I actually rather like the boss here. I think he's the hardest boss in the Light World, for whatever that's worth. At the very least, he certainly forces you to do some work to beat him. Of course, it starts off with a long, dull overworld trek. The Pegasus boots at least greatly speed this up. But the big deal with this dungeon is going to be dealing with burrowing enemies, which, if you actually try to kill them all, they can get annoying, but basically after your first encounter with any of them, all you have to do is wait for them to start burrowing, and as long as they're in their emerging animate or sinking animations, they can't hit you, so just sneak past them. And of course, all that time they spend not moving just gives you a perfect opportunity to grab pots and nail them. In general, in the whole Light World section of the game, pots are the most powerful weapon. They hit a lot harder than your sword. It's kind of funny. Being hit over the head with a pot is programmed at the same strength as a slash from the tempered sword. I guess the developers of this game had some bad experiences with flower pots when they were kids or something. And the whole deal with this maze is basically just getting the big key in the power glove. If you don't know where you're going, you can wander around for quite a while in here. You will also find the map and the compass. Like that one right there, I believe, is the compass. But those aren't really useful to someone who already knows his way through the dungeons. You also are going to see a lot of time traps. In particular, this dungeon has a lot of Beamos. Beamos have always been a fun enemy in the Zelda games, and this was their first appearance. Unlike in the 3D games, Beamos can't be hurt in this, and their eyes don't track Link. Rather, they just fire a laser straight at you if you happen to cross their line of sight. But they can't fire through major solid objects, so they can fire through certain things that you can't walk through, like those pots there. They really aren't that hard to avoid if you get a sense of their timing and know what they can and can't shoot through, but even still, this manages to be one of their more deadly incarnations, in my opinion. Of course, you also have the sandpit enemies. That's the second one I've dealt with. They only can take 2 hits, or a single spin attack or arrow hit, and that's pretty much what you gotta do. If you go in and try to fight them directly, you start getting sucked in, and while you certainly can beat them that way, it's the hard way, and I've never been a fan of the hard way. Then, of course, we even have the spinning tile rooms. All spinning tile rooms in this game have the same pattern. But since these only have lock doors instead of the shutters at the end, I just have to find the key and get out. There, I had a bit of a brain fart, and I just couldn't remember which pot had the key. I confused it with the next one coming up, where the key's in the upper right. And snagging the rupees, which is pretty important, because again, these are really generous enemies, and I want to make sure I have 610 rupees before I reach the end of Dark World 1. That'll let me buy flippers just in time for the water dungeon. But now I'm getting pretty close to the boss. And again, this boss is a boss that can be a bit of a challenge if you aren't quite ready for him. I'm certainly not going to show you all that effective of tactics, but I'll give you the general idea of what you should do. And hopefully your runs will be a little cleaner than mine, even though I, of course, do win. The bow does a lot of damage to this guy, and you can generally nail him with spin attacks pretty easily. But all his appearances and his movement are completely random. and he likes to move at diagonals, so it can be really hard to nail him with arrows. You pretty much can just take the conservative approach, stay away and wait for him to appear in unfavorable spots, or you can rush in and try to time shots just as he emerges. That requires you to have better timing than I'm demonstrating, though. His pattern's just too slow for me to find it natural. And even though it seems inefficient the way I'm spreading out my hits among all the pieces, it's actually best. Because when any one piece is exploding, the other pieces won't shoot rocks until it finishes exploding. And the last segment shoots rocks in 8 directions. If you spread out your damage well, it's possible to kill the last segment before you ever have to deal with the 8-way rocks. I failed that this time, and have to show how to deal with the 8-way rocks, which is just spacing yourself far enough away so that you can squeeze between a gap in the rocks, just barely off of the horizontal, and moving in and striking them really quickly. But of course, that's trickier than just preventing it altogether. However, I did prevail, and I now have the Pendant of Wisdom, and I will see you in the next segment where I get the Magic Mirror.